One might think that the Taliban and the Islamic State would be natural allies, both being Sunni militant groups with a conservative interpretation of Islam, and both being committed to the concept of jihad. However, the truth is that they are bitter rivals and have been at war with each other in Afghanistan since 2015. The key difference between the two jihadist groups lies in their goals. The Taliban have always been clear that the goal of their jihad was to take back the country, whereas the Islamic State has always been clear that their goal was to take over the entire world. In a 2017 radio broadcast in Afghanistan, the leader of ISIS-K said that their jihad would continue until, quote, conquering the United States and converting its citizens to Tawhid, which means oneness of God as perceived by Islam. Let's go back and look at the origins of ISIS-K, or Islamic State Khorasan province. Khorasan is the old Islamic name for the region containing Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan and Iran. The use of that name is in itself a political act because it implies that it does not recognize the legitimacy of the modern nation-state Afghanistan. The jihadists who started ISIS-K were originally Pakistani militants. Before they took the banner of the Islamic State, they were loosely considered to be the Pakistani Taliban. Yes, there's the Taliban on the Pakistan side too. These militants migrated to Afghanistan's eastern province of Nangarhar from the Pakistani tribal areas after escaping a 2010 Pakistani army offensive. These Pakistani militants were originally welcomed as refugees. Local communities in Nangarhar felt it was their moral obligation to extend a helping hand to their Pashtun brothers escaping violence. However, gradually, these refugees from Pakistan turned out to be more than oppressed civilians in pursuit of humanitarian assistance. They carried weapons and displayed allegiances to Pakistani militant groups. Seeing the presence of these militants in Afghanistan, the Afghan government, long having resented Pakistan for supporting and providing safe haven for the Taliban since the 1990s, saw an opportunity to turn the tables on Pakistan and cultivate their own insurgent proxy against the Pakistani government. So, the Afghan government's intelligence services started to befriend the Pakistani militants. They allowed these militants free movement across the province, as well as offering treatment in government hospitals. Tensions between the Pakistani militants and the Afghan Taliban started in December 2014, when the Taliban asked the militants to leave a particular district in Nangarhar. The Taliban also confiscated a shipment of weapons reportedly worth $50,000 US. After a series of failed negotiations, the Pakistani militants refused to leave, and fighting commenced between the two groups. It was at this time that the Pakistani militants publicly declared their allegiance to the Islamic State. When hostilities began between the Taliban and ISIS-K, the Afghan government initially still supported their former beneficiaries. So much so, the local residents of Nangarhar initially thought that ISIS-K was actually a pro-Afghan government force because the group's commanders said that we are here to fight the ISI Emirate, referring to the Afghan Taliban and their link to the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI. Before this incident, the Taliban held a positive opinion of the Islamic State. Many Taliban saw ISIS as a defender of Sunnis in Iraq and Syria. But after the fighting started between ISIS-K and the Taliban, this view changed. Taliban leadership contacted ISIS headquarters in Syria to try to convince the Islamic State to stay away from Afghanistan. The Taliban wanted ISIS to leave the responsibility for jihad in Afghanistan to the Taliban. The ISIS leadership in Syria responded by referring to the Taliban as stooges of the Pakistani intelligence agencies and gave the Taliban a choice: either repent and join IS or face the wrath of IS fighters. After this, the Taliban's clerics in Pakistan issued a fatwa calling for Taliban fighters to act in self-defense against IS. This began a brutal military campaign by the Taliban against ISIS-K in Nangarhar province in late June 2015. During the beginning of the war between ISIS-K and the Taliban, the Afghan government initially remained neutral. Afghan government officials saw ISIS-K as a useful tool to undermine the government's traditional and more powerful enemy, the Taliban. However, it was just at this time that the political winds were also changing. The new Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, had come into office pledging greater cooperation with Pakistan to combat militancy on both sides of the border. Thus, did Afghan intelligence, turning on their former Pakistani militant beneficiaries, provide the U.S. with key intelligence for an airstrike which killed dozens of ISIS-K fighters and senior leaders. Testifying in front of Congress in 2019, the commander of U.S. Central Command testified on the Taliban's effectiveness on fighting ISIS-K.
So over the last several months in eastern Afghanistan, we've watched the Taliban compress and crush ISIS presence on the ground in southern Nangarhar province, and they've been very effective doing that. That's some of the worst terrain in the world. They've paid a very steep price in their own fighters.
Was that independent of our support?
there was very limited support from us, and I would characterize that as very limited support from us. So they've demonstrated capability to do it. It was a bloody mess, but they did it. In fact, ISIS really now no longer holds ground in Nangarhar province. They're trying to reestablish themselves up to the north in other provinces, and it remains yet to be seen if they're going to be successful doing that.
So, in a very strange turn of events, the fight against ISIS-K brought together traditional enemies for a mutual cause, including the Taliban, the Afghan government, and the U.S. government. In 2016, the U.S. stepped up its air campaign against ISIS-K after it designated ISIS and all its branches as a global terrorist organization. It was on ISIS-K that the U.S. dropped the Moab, massive ordnance air blast, also known as the mother of all bombs, in 2016, on its cave complex stronghold in Nangarhar. In May 2019, reportedly 1,400 ISIS-K fighters and their families surrendered to the Afghan government. ISIS-K was a weakened force, but it still managed to launch terrorist attacks against traditional Islamic State targets, Shia Muslims. While weakened by the Taliban, Afghan, and U.S. operations, ISIS-K nonetheless retained a degree of durability and strength. ISIS-K also succeeded in recruiting amongst the young Afghan population with its slick social media campaigns, which romanticized the ISIS lifestyle and was the same kind of social media campaign that got youth from Western countries to join ISIS in Syria. Today, ISIS-K remains a marginal force on the Afghan battlefield, but remains capable of complex terrorist attacks as demonstrated in the August 26, 2021 bombing of Kabul airport. At the time this video was made, the Taliban had just taken over and the evacuation flights are just wrapping up. It can be expected that the Taliban will seek revenge for its fighters killed in the Kabul airport bombing and will continue its war against ISIS-K. Thanks for watching, and shout out to the Afghanistan Analysts Network, whose articles are the source of this video. You can see the list of articles I used here.